Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. My name is Stephanie Robert, and I'm director of the UW-Madison Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. I use she, her pronouns, and for my visual description, I'm a middle-aged white woman with short brown and gray hair and glasses, and today I'm wearing a purple jacket with black collar and some chunky purple jewelry. Our school is so excited to offer this important event. We've organized this conference for many years, and this is our third year holding it virtually. We're pleased to have it virtually again so that more people are able to benefit from our outstanding speakers. This year's conference includes 27 speakers spread over this afternoon and next Friday afternoon. For many of us, this conference has become a critical date on our calendar each year. We learn, scrutinize, question, and find new ways to commit ourselves to addressing injustice. We ask this of ourselves, and our social work code of ethics demands it of us. Every year, our conference has a theme, and this year, the theme is Centering Disability Justice. We have outstanding opening keynote speakers coming up in just a few minutes, and I know we have much to learn from them and our other speakers over these packed 2 days. I do believe that disability justice receives less attention than many other critical topics in social work. Personally, I'm eager to learn how to better integrate disability justice into my own teaching and advocacy. A conference of this scale requires many hands. Thank you to the students, staff, community members, and instructors who serve on the planning committee this year, and members of our school community who are volunteering to help with the technology for this event. I want to especially thank the 3 conference co-chairs who you will meet during the conference: Laura Dresser, Khadijah Marquardt-Davis, and Bethany Matson. Thank you also to our financial sponsors for making this conference a reality. Because of our donors, we're able to make this conference free to all of you and to provide free CEUs to those of you who want them. We're committed to lowering the barriers to folks getting to engage with this important content. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a challenging but enjoyable conference. I'm going to now turn things over to Khadijah Marquardt-Davis, co-chair of the conference committee and an MSW alumna of our school. And I'm going to go offline so I can go across the street to join the watch party with other students, faculty, and staff of our school. Enjoy.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hello and welcome to the 9th Annual Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. As Stephanie just stated, I'm Khadijah Marquardt-Davis, a co-chair of the conference. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and for my visual description, I'm a 30-something light-skinned Black woman with long black box braids, and today I'm wearing a black turtleneck and red dangling earrings, and I also have my nose pierced. As an alumna of the school's MSW program, it has been an incredible honor to help plan and execute this conference. I'm particularly excited about the theme of this year's conference, Centering Disability Justice, as this is an area of social work that is often overlooked. Throughout this conference, you will hear from speakers who push the boundaries of what is possible within our profession and continuously challenge the status quo, with breakout sessions that will explore issues of disability and racial justice to provide tools, frameworks, and inspiration to change social work practice. As such, I hope that you will walk away from this conference feeling inspired and ready to take action. Today, we have more than 1,000 people gathered from all across Dane County, Wisconsin, the nation, and even the globe. This conference was started 9 years ago when current events forced us to re-examine how social work responds to continual incidences of racial injustice. We knew it was important to challenge social work to engage in racial and social justice action. As such, our goals are to explore the impact of social policies and services on racial inequities, including the unintended consequences of these policies and services. To support social workers working toward an increasingly equitable and just society, and to celebrate the profound social justice actions of our social work community. And today we build upon this by moving into concrete anti-racist action with an emphasis on centering disability justice. The popularity of this conference has made it clear that social workers are striving to do better, be better, and continually challenging ourselves to examine not only our individual roles, but also our profession. However, it is important to remember that anti-racism is a verb and requires us to not only show up, but to take action. So as you spend your time with us today and next Friday, I ask that you keep an open mind to all the various ideas presented and that you continue to challenge and push yourself towards anti-racist action. And with that, and on behalf of the Planning Committee for the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, I ask that you join me in acknowledging that our University of Wisconsin-Madison campus, here on the shores of the Wunkshik-Home Ikla, or Lake Mendota, resides within the sacred homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place they call Dajope or Four Lakes. As the reach of the university extends to the four corners of our state, we also respectfully recognize the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations of Wisconsin. Whether you are watching this from the land of these 12 First Nations or you are more distant, we encourage you to learn about the history of the land that you are on. Our land-grant university could not have been established or sustained were it not for state and federally sponsored settler colonialism that dispossessed and displaced American Indian tribes and communities across the state. We must now confront the outcomes of unjust land treaties and the harm caused by a university's past complicity with policies of cultural and physical genocide as we seek reconciliation with Indigenous nations and communities of Wisconsin. As social workers, we have a duty to look critically at the role our profession has played in attempted cultural genocide and destruction of Indigenous families. Such as was the aim of boarding schools in this state and across this continent. This conference is rooted in critical reflection on our work as social workers. Our goal is to bring clarity about the past, but also to challenge and inspire us all to move into action in our work and communities once this conference is over. We hope this conference provides a space for critical reflection, humility, and openness, which will allow us all to reflect, to hear and tell truths, and move forward to move toward action and transformation to support Indigenous rights, cultural equity, and racial equity. With acknowledgement and gratitude, we move forward in our journey today. The fact that we are on Ho-Chunk land in the way that we are on it is not separate from what we are gathered here to do today. Okay. So today we will begin the conference with our opening keynote, Leah Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasinha, in conversation with Dr. Sami Schalk, which will run from now until 1:30. We will then have a 30-minute break before the start of our first round of breakout sessions. There are going to be 6 to choose from, and they will start at 2 p.m. Central Time this afternoon. Next week, on Friday, February 3rd, we will start our breakout sessions from noon to 1:30, and then our closing plenary speaker, Amani Barbran, will speak from 2 to 3:30 p.m. If you have not already, please make sure to register for next Friday's portion of the conference, which you can do so on our website. Additionally, breakout presentation links will be located on our Eventbrite landing page for the conference and linked below in the YouTube description box. There will also be captioning and cart services for all breakout sessions. Although we have a large capacity in each presentation, if you find that your first choice is full, please go back to the Eventbrite landing page and select a different session. All sessions will be recorded and available soon on the conference website. And if you want to use for the plenary session, please click on the virtual sign-in link in the YouTube description box below and follow the procedure listed on our conference website and Eventbrite page links for continuing education. Mm-hmm. And as a reminder, you will receive your CEUs in the next month if you registered and filled in the virtual sign-in link connected to this very plenary. And finally, please watch out for our evaluation form, and please take the time to fill it out and return it us. We greatly appreciate your feedback. And now it is with real excitement that I introduce our keynote speakers, Leah and Sami. Leah Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasinha, who uses she, they pronouns, is a non-binary, femme, autistic, disabled writer, space creator, disability and transformative justice movement worker of Burgher and Tamil Sri Lankan, Irish, Galician, and Roma ascent. They are the author or co-editor of 10 books, including The Future is Disabled, Prophecies, Love Notes and Morning Songs, Tonguebreaker, and then our community read for this year, Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, and Dirty River. A 2020 to 2021 Disability Futures Fellow. Since 2009, they have been a lead performer with Disability Justice Performance Collective, Sins Invalid. Since 2020, they have been on the programming committee of the Disability and Intersectionality Summit. Raised in the Rust Belt in central Massachusetts and shaped by the
Toronto. You can just say Toronto.
Perfect. In Oakland, they are currently at work building Living Altars / the Stacey Park Milburn Liberation Arts Center, an organization and accessibility residence for disabled
Hi, everybody just froze.
And creators. Dr. Sami Schalk who uses she, her pronouns, is an associate professor of gender and women's studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is the author of Bodies, Minds, Reimagined, Disability, Race, and Gender in Black Women's Speculative Fiction, and Black Disability Politics. Dr. Schalk's academic work focuses on race, disability, and gender in contemporary American literature and culture. She also writes for mainstream outlets, including a monthly column, Pleasure Practices in Tone, Madison. Dr. Schalk identifies as fat, Black, queer, disabled femme, and a pleasure activist. And it is now with great pleasure that I introduce our two plenary speakers, Leah and Dr. Sami Schalk.
Hey, can everyone who can hear me talking? Because there's been some glitches this morning. Sami, I'm seeing you nod.
Yep, you sound good.
Okay, beautiful. Hi, I just want to say Khadija and everyone, thank you so much for having us and for this welcome. It's an honor to be here. And I really mean it when I say that I don't take the opportunity to be in these spaces together lightly at all. I don't take the opportunity to gather together safely and virtually during the ongoing triple-demic lightly at all. And our time here isn't promised. And I know that you all have probably sat through a lot of Zooms over the last 3 years and will continue to do so. But I'm really excited about being in sacred space together with all of us and being able to share stories and wisdom together. I'm going to do a quick visual description and then kick it over to Sami. I'm Leah. I am a light-skinned, light brown skin, mixed race, Sri Lankan and white, non-binary femme in my 40s, looking younger than that to some people. I've got purple and brown curly hair on one side of my head, a green top, multiple gay chain necklaces, and some big glasses. And I'm coming to you from Nipmuc territory in Western Massachusetts. And it's my honor to be in conversation and co-leadership here with the great Dr. Sami Schalk, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Leah. So I'm Sami Schalk. I am a fat, light-skinned Black woman with short curly hair, white glasses, and a pink and red and cream floral dress. I'm sitting in front of a bookshelf that has large posters of both of my books on it and a picture of a Black woman wearing a dress made of newspaper right above my head. And I also have earrings that are my book, but you can't really see them, but I'm going to show them anyway.
Oh yeah, they're there in spirit.
Yes. And I'm coming to you from Ho Chunk Land, Daejeop, in Madison, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to be together for around 90 minutes. And because one of the first things about disability justice is breaks, we wanted to tell you that there's going to be a break in the middle of it because we're really cute and engaging, but even people as cute and engaging as us, I can't listen to anyone for 90 minutes. So fuck that. Also, I swear. So that's also, to me, part of disability justice. And we wanted to share a lot of stuff with you about what is disability justice. What might it look like and what has it looked like to be in social work and to be in and outside of systems enacting disability justice? What is the work right now in this pandemic time on the clock of the world? This, as one person called it the other day, ableist fascist time of the world. What are the possibilities for resistance and what are our own stories? We are gonna, I wrote this down. We're gonna break around halfway through. We're gonna be wrapped up by 1:30, 1:25 Central Time, and break at around 12:50, 12:55, I think. Sami, am I getting this right?
Absolutely right.
Okay, beautiful. And we're also, it's not just going to be our cute selves talking and entertaining you. We're also going to ask you some questions, and there's going to be journal prompts and stuff. So get ready for that. I also want to take a minute to do something that I often do in speaking, which is to really encourage you to come as you are, which is also another part of disability justice. Please feel free to take breaks, lie down, go to the bathroom, go smoke a cigarette in the middle of this if you need to. Stim, be yourself, your disabled, autistic, deaf, in pain, grieving self, as much as you want and need to and can. Yeah. And we're going to start off by just talking about who the hell are we and how do we come into disability and disability justice anyway? Sami, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came into disability identity and disability community through disability studies. I took a class called Women and Disability when I was 19 at Miami University, where I was in undergrad. And it blew my mind. It just truly blew my mind. At the time, I had just come out as queer, so I was identifying as Black and queer and a woman, and I felt like I knew everything there was to know about oppression at 19, and turns out I didn't. And it just shifted everything for me to realize there was this whole world and the whole community that I had had no experience about and was political in ways that, the ableist world never let me know that there was politics attached to disability. So I've been in community this whole time since I was 19. I'm 36 now, but only in the last 4 years have I been identifying as disabled. And that really came about through doing the research for my book, Black Disability Politics, which is an open access book. Oh, it's this way. It's an open access book, which means anyone can access that. If you go to my social media, there are links to read it online for free. And doing that research, it helped me come into a realization that even though I didn't always understand the way disability impacted me in relationship to some of the white disability studies texts that I was reading, the more I came in community with disabled people of color and Black disabled people in particular, I realized the way that racism and sexism have significantly shaped my disablement, have caused disablement, have shaped the way I experience disability. And so it's been new for me to be identified as disabled in community and coming more into disability justice community as opposed to just disability studies, which I think is really important to say that disability studies is not disability justice. And disability advocacy and these other things are also not necessarily disability justice. And we'll get more into what these things are later. But disability community has saved my life. It has helped me learn how to live better and happier and healthier by accepting my body mind as it is and learning from other disabled people how to make the adjustments that I need to make. One of the things that I mentioned on another panel that Leah and I were on is that when I read Leah's book was the first time that I realized that I could write in bed. I didn't have to be sitting in front of a computer to do it. I could use voice notes, I could do other things. And it really helped me write my second book to be able to write from bed. How about you, friend?
Oh, how about me? Did I just freeze? I'm just going to keep checking in because the tech's really crip today. Okay.
Yeah. Nope. You're still there.
Okay. I love that. Who am I and how did I become disabled? I wanted to echo something that Sami said, which is super important and which I'm sharing because I think it could be the experience of a lot of people who are listening and witnessing us right now, is that most of the world is disabled. Jumping ahead, the definition that I often use is that disability encompasses physical disability, chronic illness, deafness, being hard of hearing, being neurodivergent, being mad, and more. It's anybody who doesn't have the off the rack body mind that's white, skinny, cis, male, and quote unquote normal. And there's more of us than there are them. And most people, if you live long enough, you're going to get disabled. And for those of us who are Black, Indigenous, and or people of color, there are ways that our experiences of disability have been gatekept from the idea of what disability is. And I'm just repeating what you said. The TLDR is that there's so many of us who are disabled and don't know it, but we are. Or even if we're not yet, we are in communities that are profoundly affected by disability and by ableism. So my story is that I now say that I'm a second generation disabled person. My mom is a white and Roma polio survivor, a working class Milltown girl from Webster, Massachusetts, who got polio in the 40s and did not have access to healthcare and had a quote unquote mild case and was really encouraged to pass because she could walk, but whose whole life was profoundly shaped both by disability and by being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, which led to her having complex PTSD. And I'm her kid. My father, as Sri Lankans, I think we like to joke that everyone in Sri Lanka has PTSD because we've survived, colonization and civil war and fascism. And my father definitely was not normal. And then they had me and they were like, let's pass like hell as much as we can to survive. And we know that passing is a double-edged sword. Like, it'll save you and it'll kill you, right? So I grew up a little autistic, neuro weird kid, like not all, but like a lot of autistic. My friend Naima calls what's happening now the middle-aged Black and brown autistic revolution, where we're all figuring out we're autistic. But in the 80s, it was mostly white cis boys who were seen as autistic, and we were just seen as like strange, difficult, and stupid. So I grew up in an autistic experience. And then when I was 21, I got sick with chronic fatigue / ME, which a lot of people know what it is now because there's so many lines being drawn that connecting the experience of long COVID with having those disabilities. And I was in a radical Black and brown political community that was awesome and that did not know what to do in 1997 with my 21-year-old, very sick and tired self that all of a sudden could not walk across the city, wheat paste, go to the demonstration, go to the meeting and cook all the food. And what I did have was slowly finding other disabled Black and brown folks who, some of whom had quote unquote very visible disabilities, some of whom had quote unquote very invisibilized disabilities, but we found each other. Me and my friend Cyrus Marcus Ware, Syrus Marcus, Ware, who's an incredible Black trans disabled organizer and artist. We've been friends for 23 years now, and we joke that we were doing disability way before we came out about being disabled or got to join disability justice, when we were doing prison justice activism and AIDS activism and being sick and being racialized, right? And living at multiple margins. So that's some of my story. And last step before we segue, I just want to say that what I did have connect with back when I first got sick was the psychiatric survivor movement in Toronto, which was and is a movement of radical people who had been labeled with mental illness and experienced the medical industrial complex, and who were the first place where I was like, wow, I can be crazy in public with these people. And we're not just seen as patients to be fixed or clients to be served. We're organizing on our own. And we're doing stuff like organizing Psychiatric Survivor Pride Day, which was modeled on Queer Pride, where we're protesting in the streets. We're fighting against forced electroshock. We're fighting against forced treatment. We are hanging out together and allowing ourselves to be non-normative and supporting each other. And that saved my life. And that's something I want to come back to as a story, because I think specifically as social workers, you're right at the axis of being potentially a force for liberation and being a force for control of people who are named as, oh, you can always only be a client, never an agent, right? And there's those of you who are listening right now who are like, yep, I'm both. I'm not just, it's the hair club for men. I'm a member and also the president. Maybe that's a weird metaphor. And I'll say more in a minute, but like fast forwarding many years, then around 2008, I was in Oakland, California for grad school when disability justice was getting started. And I snuck off to a Sins Invalid performance because I couldn't tell anyone in my community that I was seeing a disabled thing. And my life got changed by, like Sami said, by encountering Black and brown, intersectional disabled community that told my story. And I just want to say that all of our stories are the bedrock of this movement, and the stories that you hold of disability in your life and your community are going to be what you draw on in you bringing DJ to this work. Okay, I'll shut up now.
No need. Leah, do you have control of the slides, or does a magical person behind the scenes?
I think a magical person has control of the slides. So now we're going to do a little like, what is this shit anyway? So great. Okay. And I'm going to read it, and the interpreter is going to get real small. So I'm going to read it, and then, excuse me, I just burped into the phone. So whenever I do a training, I start off with what always seems, I'm always like, when will this become Captain Obvious? And it never is. This is a definition of what is disability. And the text says, when we speak of disability, we are celebrating the brilliance. Sorry, I'm going to get really close to the screen because I can't see it. The brilliance and vitality of a vast community of peoples with non-normative bodies and minds, whether a disability is visible or not. And this includes, though is not limited to, folks who identify as disabled, chronically ill, deaf, mad, neurodivergent, and more. And this is from Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is a North American-wide white anti-racist organization, Disability Justice Caucus. And then there's a little meme on the side that says, roses are red, violets are blue, I want to smash abled supremacy with you. And I want to just briefly say this kind of echoes what we talked about before about like, this is a much broader definition than most of us have been taught. And something I really want to pull out is the words, it celebrates the brilliance and vitality of vast communities of people, which most of the time disabled people, we are seen as something to be fixed or like a depoliticized health problem, not communities with histories, lovers, friends, art, culture, arguments, tactics.
Yeah. And Leah, I want to add here that, you know, that and more. I experience this a lot with teaching, that students will take my classes and we'll talk about something like having migraines, having anxiety, that students will realize like, oh, I didn't know that meant I was disabled. Like I didn't know that. So really emphasizing here non-normative body minds that are outside of the expected norm. It doesn't require you to identify as disabled within community, does not require you to have a diagnosis. It does not require you to prove anything to anyone. And I think that as we're kind of moving through this, it'll be important as we're making connections to racial justice, because we know that access to things like diagnosis are much harder for folks of color who have less access to quality insurance. So we want to make that clear in the way that we're defining disability for you all.
Yeah, and something that just pops up to me that might, you know, click into like whatever work you're doing as, you know, as social workers who are working in different fields, is that I just think of something as concrete as like intakes, where often, you know, it's common now. I've worked in places where it's like, you know, we ask about race, we ask about culture, we ask about sex and gender. Often there's a sense of like, oh, if you're disabled, I'll know it. And then there's a lot of, even if you ask, do you identify as disabled? A lot of Black and brown people are going to say, no, I've got a condition, or, well, I don't know if I can claim that. Like I briefly had a job running the Disabled Student Center at UW-Seattle, and there were so many students who would literally come to the door and be like, I don't know if I'm allowed to come in if I don't have a diagnosis. And I was just like, you can just come your ass in, it's fine. And there's all kinds of complicated ways where people feel like, I don't know if I count, and I don't know if I'm going to get smashed down on if I claim this, that then stop people from being able to access tools and community and understanding that could save their life.
Absolutely.
Next slide, please. Okay, and this segues to, Sandy, could you actually read this? Because I'm having to use
Absolutely.
my phone, and I would
Yes.
love that. Thank you so much.
So this is a definition, a working and living definition by T.L. Lewis, Dustin Gibson, and others in the Black disabled community. T.L. and Dustin have been revising this over the years to update it. And so this is the definition that we like to use to define ableism. So it's a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, misogyny, colonialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's appearance and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave, in scare quotes. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. I love this definition for many reasons. One is that I really appreciate the way that anti-Blackness is centered in our understanding of what is ableism, right? In the way that we construct what is a normative body mind, what is normative behavior, is shaped by racism and anti-Blackness, is shaped by misogyny, right? The expectation of we behave in certain ways based on gender. And then that last line has been really important for my work in talking to Black activists and Black organizers to understand that you don't have to be disabled to experience ableism, because the expectations and norms for behavior are based in ableism, and that impacts a lot of us, and especially Black people. So this is a strong definition that goes beyond just saying ableism is discrimination against disabled people, right? I think that's the standard thing that folks put out. But because, again, this is also a conference connecting racial justice, we really want you to understand how ableism is deeply, deeply tied to history of anti-Blackness and racism in this country.
Absolutely. Next slide, please. And I figured out a workaround. I can read it, or Sami, if you want to, but I'm good either way.
I'm happy to read it.
Cool.
So the next term that we want to introduce to you is disability justice. Disability justice is a term and a movement building framework invented in 2005 by Patty Byrne, Leroy Moore, Mia Mingus, Eli Clare, and Sebastian Margaret. They are disabled people who identify as Black, Asian, poor, white, queer, and trans activists. They were sick of the disability rights movement being white, straight, and focused on a rights and independent living framework only, and of Black, Indigenous, and people of color progressive movements forgetting, in scare quotes, disability. Co-founder of Sins Invalid and DJ organizer Patty Byrne says that disability justice exists in the cliffhangers left behind by disability rights being a movement focused on a legal civil rights approach, single issue approach, and emphasizing white, male, cis, straight leadership and visions of what disability issues are.
Thanks. And one thing, segueing off of Sami, some of the things you were talking about with TL and Dustin's definition, one thing I wanted to say that ties these two slides together is that, for example, when you were talking about that expansive idea of what ableism is, right? That it's not just like, oh, people with disabilities face oppression. I think a lot of times in like the approximately 30 seconds on disability issues in history that people get, ever, they're like, what you get is like, oh, it's when there's no ramp. And it's like, yep, no, that's ableism. But what disability justice would say is like, yeah, it's no ramp. And it's the fact that 50% of Black and brown people who are murdered by police are also disabled, autistic, deaf, more than one. And that, one of the core struggles that disability justice organizers have organized around is that if we are going to end racist police terror and murder of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we're not going to win it unless we address racism and ableism at the same time and where they intersect, right? Like you can't do one without the other. For me, a place I go to with this definition is that when people are like, well, what's disability justice organizing like? I'm like, it's the issues of BIPOC disabled people, which are, to name something, police, prisons, like if you don't end up in prison because you're disabled, you will get disabled in prison because of the violence of prison, right? I think about in terms of attempted land theft and genocide in indigenous communities, and disability conditions that come out of things like uranium mining and being taken away from land base and culture and being pushed off, right? That's a disability justice issue. For those of us, I think of in the vast Asian diaspora who have experienced war, imperial invasion, and, again, like environmental racism, I think of the ways in which disability shows up in everything from our communities not being allowed to migrate because, oh, you're disabled. Immigration law is so racist, they won't let you come if you're a drag on the system, right? To the ways in which war and invasion from Afghanistan to Sri Lanka and beyond to Vietnam is disabling. Like how many of our family members are amputees and so forth and disabled because of those conditions. And that spreads out in many, many Black and Brown communities also, right? Next slide, please. Okay.
Okay. You want me to do it?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
I got my computer working. Do you want to alternate?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, sweet.
So disability justice principles that comes from Sins Invalid and Patty Byrne, and this comes from their disability justice primer. You can see the image on the right hand side of the screen in case you want to look that up and download the full primer. So the first principle of disability justice, which is a little covered up there, but it's intersectionality. So hopefully that's already clear by what we've been talking about, is understanding the relationship between ableism as a system and other systems of oppression, understanding that they are inseparable, they rely on each other to function, and in fact can operate in the name of each other, right? So that is the first principle of disability justice.
Mm-hmm. And the second principle is leadership of the most impacted. And by that, we mean we're a movement that's not just like the 1% of disability, right? It's not just like the, white cis guy who went to Harvard, who's a wheelchair user, who's an oil baron. It's like we want to be a movement, and we're working towards being a movement because it's a constant struggle that's led by people who are not only impacted by multiple oppressions, but it's also looking at issues within disability community where, for example, one example could be the ways in which people with developmental and intellectual disabilities sometimes get shafted in greater disability community because they're seen as not smart, right? And being like, actually, those of us who are the most impacted by systems actually have the most to offer because we're surviving sometimes both with the least resources and with the most overlooked brilliance. Yeah.
The third principle is an anti-capitalist politic. Disability justice is inherently anti-capitalist, and this is largely because, or partially because, disability is defined in the US by an inability to work, right? That work is the way in which we define who is and is not disabled. Disabled folks are limited in the amount of money. If you're on state support, limited in how much income you can have, how much savings you can have, right? Capitalism keeps disabled people poor, and being disabled is expensive. So disability justice has an anti-capitalist politic.
Mm-hmm. Also, capitalism made this shit happen. It wants willing workers who can just toil at Amazon 24/7, and then, okay, we're just going to kick your body out of the way when you drop. And it's kind of knowing that this is not going to be fixed by like the $1 million prosthetic or the $1 million cure. It's going to be, we're going to end ableism when capitalism's over and it's not disabling us anymore because we're not being worked to death.
Yeah.
That one.
And I know we're going to talk about pandemic later, but I think in particular, right, the push to go back to work and is disabling, right? We have more and more folks with long COVID and all the effects of that. So unquestionably, capitalism in this moment is disabling more and more of us in a massive long-term way.
Mm-hmm. And we get to do the fun and not easy thing of uniting to completely destroy it before the world totally burns to death. Sorry, I'm a Scorpio rising. Principle number 4, commitment to cross-movement organizing. So we're all in the same ocean in different boats that overlap. And we're all, if we're going to take down this monster, it's not going to be any one movement or any one group or identity that's going to kill it. We all got to take this shit down, is what this means. And the way I've seen that play out is like, I've witnessed and hopefully been a part of a lot of work to get people to be like, okay, we're on board. How do we show up for each other? How do we be accomplices? How do we think about disability and ableism and all of the work that we're doing, wherever it is? Because it's not out there, it's in here, right? Sorry, I do a lot of 80s jokey uncle metaphors. I hope that's okay. And it's hard work. And I also, I'm thinking about when I first came into disability justice in the Bay Area, which, can be a wonderful and annoying place of like, oh my God, it's so radical. I was just going to all these non-disabled identified Black and brown queers I know being like, this shit's so cool. And a lot of them were just like, crickets, that's depressing. And through a lot of conversations and work by a lot of badass organizers, fast forward 8 years, and it was one of the times that Trump tried to take DACA away, and my friend and comrade Stacey Park Milburn, Milbern, was messaging me crying from a demo because she's like, there are these 17-year-old undocumented activists on the mic being like, we have chairs at the front of the rally. We're going to put all the elders and chair users and people who use mobility devices at the front, and we're going to walk at the slowest pace because if the revolution's not accessible, it's not the revolution. And she's like, I'm crying. All those conversations were not a waste of time. And I was like, yeah. So I also want to say DJ is a lot of talking and a lot of conversations in small moments. Yeah.
Principle 5 is recognizing wholeness, that there's nothing to be fixed about us, that we were whole and good. We accept our bodies and our minds as they are.
Mm-hmm. The 6th principle is sustainability, which I know is a really big buzzword that has been really co-opted. And I know that for a lot of us, we have different relationships this world. There's been a lot of memes going around saying, I saw one that my friend and comrade Ejeris, Ejeris Dixon, posted the other day that said something like, self-care can be a club we beat people over the head with who actually are drowning for lack of community care, right? When disability justice people say sustainability, we don't mean, oh, go on an expensive yoga retreat. Yeah, you can afford that. We mean really moving at the pace of our bodies and minds, and that when there's grief, when somebody dies or a lot of people dies, that we be with each other and we don't go, oh, you can't be sad in this meeting because you're not being a good, comrade or worker. It means that we really move at the pace of our bodies and we figure out what supports them together. And it's not about fixing it, but it's also not about the 900 meeting a week, 18-hour day thing, or knowing that sometimes when we have to do that because we're poor, that's not the end goal we're working towards. Yeah.
Yeah. Principle 7 is a commitment across disability solidarity. There's a long history of a disability hierarchy. Folks with physical disabilities, sensory disabilities that are stable, kind of not changing, non-chronic, kind of being privileged within the disability rights movement. And so this is a commitment to access for all, right? And solidarity with people with disabilities different than your own.
Mm-hmm. Number 8 is interdependence. And, I saw some friends of mine did a presentation one time, both disabled people, that just said, what the heck is interdependence? That is the $1 million question, but it is the idea that we all have bodies and minds with needs, disabled and not disabled. None of us can do this alone. And it's a bit of a challenge to the earlier disability rights movement that was really focused on this idea of independence and independent living. And I can be just as good as an able-bodied person if I get the right help. And you know what? Kind of the strong, silent type of disability. And disability justice says instead, like, we all need to lean on each other. And also that as disabled people, we can show up for each other. We're not just these recipients of care by able people. We can throw down for each other, and we do. And we often have some of the best knowledge out there about how to care for each other. And there's a lifetime of work in learning what makes it I think a lot about how for a lot of us, it has not been safe or accessible to accept care. And for a lot of us, especially like women and feminized people who are Black, brown, indigenous, immigrant, we've been expected to care 24/7 and never get anything back. And it's about taking that apart and being like, as writer and disability justice activist Akemi, Akemi Nishida, Nishida says in the title of her book, How to Enact Care Justice.
And principle 9 is collective access. Disability studies scholar Margaret Price, Price, talks about access as a process, not a product. There's not a fixed way to provide access in every single situation. So we work together in our communities and in our meetings, wherever we are, to ensure access for all that we build collectively. I think about this in my classroom where I go beyond the bare minimum expectations of whatever I am given and ensure that folks have access in a variety of ways. And this has been really important in the wake of COVID to ensure access for students who are sick and unable to come to class, who don't necessarily have a disability accommodation, but are out for weeks at a time.
Yeah, so much. And some things I just want to add to that are, I think sometimes at different stages, but definitely early on when I'm doing organizing or training work with people who are learning about DJ, it is really common for people to be like, well, sometimes, you know, there's an access need and we can't hold it, or they're contradictory. So shit, I guess we just can't do it. And it's like, nope, you can improvise. You can slow down till you figure it out. We have so much creativity, and we as disabled people think outside the box all the time. Some stories that Stacey shared a lot where she was like, she was a power chair user, and she was like, I can take my sneakers off and use it to ramp 2 steps. And she's like, I save so much time sometimes pretending that I can't talk when people come over and pray over me. And I just go, oh, thank you. I tell a story a lot about a Sins Invalid rehearsal where the ramp on the wheelchair accessible van that 3 performers were in broke. And I just thought about, man, for a lot of able people, they would just panic. And we just were like, well, time to drive it over to the local bike shop and see if they've got welding tools. And we just persevered until we figured it out. And as we go forward into ableist fascism and climate crisis, we need all the disabled creativity that we can get, especially for folks who are newly disabled with long COVID, who many of us witnessed being like, oh my God, I have no energy. Shit, this is a life not worth living. And it's like, no, actually, there's a lot of crips out there that will teach you how to have a really great life when you have 1 teaspoon of energy at a time. Sorry, it's a lot, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
No.
Last principle is collective liberation, which echoes the cross-movement organizing principle, which is that it is all of us or none. We are not going to win unless we are all fighting for each other. So we figure out how we have each other's backs and show up for each other. There's no way to end ableism if we're like, oh, we'll just care about disabled people and they live in a vacuum. It's like, no, we have to smash colonization, imperialism, racism, sexism, transphobia, transmisogyny, fat phobia, whorephobia, all of it, which is, you know, a daunting task. But I mean, you could do that or you could watch TV. And I watch a lot of TV and I fight all these things. So we all can too. Yeah. This is great. There's just one last slide. If we could go forward. And I could read the text on the left.
Sure.
Okay. So this is a quote from Patricia Byrne, who we've mentioned a lot as one of the co-founders of this whole movement we're talking about, where she says, disability justice centers the lives and leadership of people of color, of queer and gender nonconforming people with disabilities. It is a movement building framework, not an academic theory. And when people invisibilize the leadership, there's a lot of all caps, of people of color, of queer and gender nonconforming people with disabilities, it is not disability justice. And as just a context for why I'm sharing this, it is like everything created by Black and brown people. We make really cool shit and then white people are like, great. And DJ was founded not as an exclusive movement, but it was founded as a movement that's like, we're centering Black and brown disabled folks and queer and trans disabled folks. And what we see happening increasingly is people who are not those identities being like, oh, great, we'll just take it. But then it's like, actually, No, like this is about shifting power, and this is not about just thinking about it. It's also about doing it. And it's also about the leadership of so many people who are like, I'm just on SSCI in my trailer in Las Cruces surviving. And I am somebody who's important and at the core of the movement.
And then on the right side, there's an image at the bottom is a photo of Leroy Moore, who's a Black man, and he is shirtless, holding out his hands. They're kind of holding one another. And the text above says, all bodies are unique and essential. Our bodies are whole. All bodies have strength and needs that must be met. We are powerful not despite the complexity of our bodies, but because of them. We move together with no body left behind. This is disability justice.
And that's all the slides if the magic person wants to take them away.
Yay.
Yay.
So Leah, once again, every time we think we know how much time something's going to take, it takes so much longer because we like to talk.
We do.
Do you want to do one of the journal questions and then break, or do you want to go ahead and break?
I think let's do some questions and then break.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay. Do you have a question that is your favorite you want to pull out?
Yeah, let's just start with the very top one. So if you are at home by yourself, if you want to write, journal, or text a friend, if you are in the live viewing, if you want to turn to someone else, however you want to think about this question. But let's just take 2 minutes for you to reflect on why did you become a social worker, or why do you want to become a social worker if you're currently a student? And if you already are one, what have you done? What have you done that aligns with that thing of why? Have you been able to do the reason that you became a social worker? So let's take just 2 minutes for y'all to reflect on that.
This is when I feel like we should have the Jeopardy theme song, but we didn't think about that part. Ooh, it's a visual Jeopardy theme song. Nice. Mhm.
I muted myself. Okay, so that's about 2 minutes. I think we'll go ahead and do
One more question or break?
let's go ahead and do a 5-minute break, and then you and I can text about which way we want to adjust the next
Okay, sounds
half
great.
hour of it. All right, y'all. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back right at 1 o'clock Central Time. I know folks are on different time zones, but go ahead, stretch, move your body, get some water, take care of yourself, and we will be back.
And I'm putting my phone down. Great. Okay, good. Can the magic person take me off video for a sec? Because I can't control that on my phone. Okay. Hi, y'all. Welcome back.
Hey. Leah, we currently can't see you.
Oh, weird. Can somebody bring me back, please?
No, I can. It's your screen's black.
Okay,
You
that's
have
weird
something else?
because no,
Hmm.
let me
Oh
see.
well. Oh, there you
Okay. Okay, great. I just like zooped it around and I was like, maybe they'll bring it back. Great. Yeah, the technology is doing its own thing. So thanks for that reflection. And we've got more questions for you coming up. And we wanted to segue and in our last 25 minutes together, talk both about like, just some of the oppressive roots and realities and possibilities of social work, and also the pandemic time we're upon. Sami, did you want me to kick this off? Did you want to kick it off?
You get us started.
Okay, so I'm going to say some stuff that you guys probably already know, but that social work, in my experience of it, is both a field that is heavily feminized, that many, many people go into. The people I know who are all social workers were, mostly not cis guys, a lot of working class, poor folks, Black, brown folks, queers. It's a lot of us who go into this work because we want to do good. We're called do-gooders, but like we actually literally want to do good, and we want to work in our communities to support people in a variety of ways. It's also, for a lot of folks I know, getting a social work degree is a more accessible route to being somebody who could be a credentialed therapist, right? And so there's a organization, Communities Against Rape and Abuse, CARA, that existed in Seattle during the early 2000s. And they said something once that has always stuck with me, where they said there is a fine line between working the system and being worked by it. And you always have to keep checking in about where you're at with that. For me, I've heard people talk a lot about how social workers are kind of on the front line of potentially being allies and accomplices and people who are parts of the communities that we're in, and that we're also kind of like a weaponized buffer that can separate people who are struggling with oppressions and disabilities from the state, right? And so it's always a question of like, what side are you on? Who are you doing? How are you using your power? I have a million stories I could share about this. For me, I am somebody who's both been a frontline worker without a social work degree, and somebody who is a client, of many years, as somebody who is seen as a young, too much club survivor of various forms of abuse. And I remember years ago working at my first good crisis line job at the Women's Counseling Referral and Education Center in Toronto, which is a radical counseling service, rape crisis line, resource center, et cetera, that really believed in centering, in pushing back on the ways in which like radical, rape crisis centers and and a lot of like anti-gender violence organizing was co-opted and watered down in the 80s and 90s from its radical roots, and where all of those, and this is just one section of what can be included in social work, but when I think about anti-gender violence work, domestic violence shelters and services, rape crisis, all of those things, back in the 70s in North America and throughout the whole world, those were not started by experts with degrees. They were started by survivors who were like, this doesn't exist. We are the experts on our own experience, which is a very disability justice way of thinking about it. It may or may not be listed out in the 10 principles, but one principle of disability justice space that I've seen over and over again is the radical idea that as disabled people, we actually know what we want and need. We know our bodies and minds more than any doctor or psychiatrist or therapist a lot of the time. And am I saying that there's no reason or room for there to be focused spaces of learning? No, I'm not saying that. But I am saying that there is a thing that happens when services move into what have been grassroots movements and go, oh, we need somebody with a degree to take over, that weakens it. And it's always put out there, it's like, oh, the inmates can't run the institution, we need somebody to supervise. And in fact, that Disabled Student Center that I briefly mentioned that I worked at, that was founded by disabled and deaf students, faculty, and staff, and fought like hell to get established. And then the way I got that job was that in year 3, the administration was really threatened by it. And they tried to merge it with the accommodation center, which is, the place you go to try and get your accommodations and you get told no. And then and they did it behind people's back. And then when everyone raised hell, they were like, okay, but we need to hire an adult. We need to hire a social worker to oversee you because of things like liability, right? Where they were like, what if somebody kills themselves because they're an unsupervised crazy person or disabled person? And the compromise was they hired me as, an adult, non-student disabled person to run the show. But we had to fight against that. And that's one example of a million fights that happen. Right now, all across North America, out of decades of disabled organizing and specifically coming out of the Black-led rebellions against the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, so many other Black folks of 2020, there's been a lot of folks who are like, we need care, not carcerality. We know that when people call 911, when somebody is sick or disabled or experiencing emotional crisis in public, that is a place along with traffic stops and so many other places where Black and brown people die, right? And I will say that in a lot of these projects, a thing that I, as one of many MAD and neurodivergent activists, is nervous about is that there's a lot of them that are still run by and for people who have been there. There's a whole peer movement that's been around for decades that's led by people who are like, I've experienced schizophrenia, psychosis, extreme states, suicidality. I've been there and I've got training and I can be there with you in this. Right? And I'm not going to make you feel ashamed. And I'm going to share my experience, strength, and wisdom. Yes, I am a 12-step. And that's going to be crucial. And I'm not going to shame you or make you feel like you're just this big stigmatized diagnosis. And in a lot of the projects that have been around and that are around, I see a creep where people go, maybe we should get a psychiatric nurse in. Maybe we should get some social workers. And I'm not saying that's wrong or that the categories of neurodivergent person and social worker are exclusive, because they're not. But I say that we have to be really careful when because it's a place where saneism and ableism creep into our work of, we can't trust the people who are our clients. We have to supervise, right? Mm-hmm. There's an assumption embedded in there that as mentally disabled people, as people with various disabilities, that we are only to be served, not people who have shit to offer or who can be in leadership. And there's so much more I could say about that. But some places that I really want to encourage you to check out are, first of all, the anthology, The Revolution Will Be Funded, Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex by Incite, Feminists of Color Against Violence. It's old, it's just come back out, but they talk a lot about how the current state of nonprofits and social services was actually invented and funded on purpose by the state in the 70s, because the state was really worried about all of these people's movements in the streets. And they were like, we want to kind of soften the blow a little bit. I also really want to say that another, it's not in the 10 principles, but maybe it's the 12th principle for me, is that a lot of times when people are like, okay, I want to be down, I want to support DJ, how do I do it? I'm like, so one thing you got to remember is that there's already disabled people organizing. There's a lot of times people new to the work are like, I'll do something. And I'm like, you know what? There's already disability justice organizing happening wherever you are. You may not know where it is, because one of the ways ableism works is invisibilizing us, where people are like, what disabled community? What do you mean? What do you mean disabled activism? And something that I want to pull out, like one specific example of this, is that a lot of people I have spoken with have no idea that there has been a radical movement of people experiencing, call it mental illness, call it madness, call it neurodivergence, call it like psychiatric survivorship, since the 1970s. There's 50 years of movements of people creating our own crisis lines that don't call the cops, our own pure respites that are not the inpatient, and allyship things like I'm thinking about in Toronto again. Queen Street Mental Health is one of the big psychiatric hospitals, inpatient hospitals in Toronto. And for years, there was this organization called the Patients Council that consisted of people who were long-term patients and clients and inpatient folks who'd been institutionalized as MAD folks, and radical social workers and counselors who came together to fight for the human rights of people inside. And there were people in there who were social workers, counselors, like, psychiatric nurses, staff, who were like, we don't like seeing people put in restraints and seclusion. We don't like seeing people medicated against their will. And we're going to fight against this shit side by side with people who are using these services and impacted by these systems. So my TLDR is go ahead and research and learn about groups like that, groups like Fireweed Collective, groups like Project Let's, groups like Rep MN, which is a Minneapolis-based crisis intervention group that's happening. So many more. I can send out my little Google Doc that I did not share because I suck, with a whole lot of different things to check out. But learn from what MAD people already are doing and have been doing, and see where you can fit in and see where you can support it or be a part of it. I think I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to it. I think I just want to say for folks who are Madison area local, if you are interested, there is Disability Pride Madison. It's a great group to connect with, follow, learn the work. And then if you are on the UW-Madison campus in particular, there are undergraduate student activists that are organizing to have a disability cultural center. Right now, they just have like a little space that they were given by the Multicultural Student Center, but they're working to be recognized by the university and to really do more work of disability justice on campus. Mm-hmm. So I recommend connecting with those students as well. They're incredible.
Thank you. Before we segue into the pandemic and then our outro, I remember something really important I want to talk about as a specific example of, the radical potential for good and for harm in social work. And that is mandatory reporting, which I know that y'all are dealing with. And I want you to write this down. Write down the website mandatoryreportingisnotneutral.com. That is mandatoryreportingisnotneutral.com. It's led by some really amazing abolitionists, counselors, and organizers who are really picking apart, as social workers, as people in the helping professions. We are often charged that if you hear danger to self or others, you got to call. If you hear that someone's suicidal, you got to call. If I know so many, as a former frontline worker and now transformative justice organizer, I know that so many of us who work in rape crisis and DV, are really like, shit, the minute you say there's kids in the house, I'm supposed to call Children's Protective Services, and that's going to take your kids away. And you're Black, Indigenous, or Brown, this is bad. You're disabled, this is bad. I want you to know there are radical social workers and organizers that are working to change mandatory reporting laws, which we know, way back in the day came from roots of people being like, we want to try to see what happens where somebody discloses that there's incest or DV going on. The care provider doesn't just look away, they call in somebody. But what we see is that what the law says you have to do is you have to call emergency services, the outcomes often are not helpful and make things worse, right? And I also want to shout out my friend and comrade Carly Boyce, CarleyBoyce, who her website is tinylantern.net. I don't know. I'll look it up. She has she's a radical social worker in Toronto who's queer and an abolitionist who's done a lot of work both around. She has a really great anti-carceral webinar and zine about like doing suicide support from a non-mandatory reporting place. And she's also talked about doing work in her social work licensing organization where she like did work where she was like, okay, the standard issue thing that we're supposed to do is someone discloses danger to self or others, we've got to drop a dime to 911. She's like, what if instead we just have to be like, hey, I can't hold this on my own, but like, let me work with you to see who are people you trust, who we can bring in to be a web of support, right? And I was like, right, that's what MAD movement's been doing for years. We call that a MAD map. And she was like, right, what if we could do that too? Because she's like, it is too much for any one person to hold, but the other people that we call in do not have to have guns. They could be somebody else. Yep. So I want to throw those out there as potential inspos for, things that you can do. And yeah, Sami.
Leah, I'm picturing the cover of your edited book with Jairus Dixon. What's the title of it again?
It's called Beyond Survival: Strategies and Stories from the Transformative Justice Movement. And it just came out on audiobook, and Jairus and one of our contributors narrated it, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
I would just also recommend that book if you are looking to expand your imagination for what's possible. There are other ways of doing things. I found it to be a really useful and also challenging book that sometimes I had to like put down and come back to multiple times. But learning other ways of engaging with conflict and harm in our communities is just, it's so essential. So just, yeah, highly recommend the book.
Thank you. And to shout out one more resource that makes me want to shout out the book Saving Our Own Lives, which just came out by the great Shira, Shira Hassan, Hassan, who is a Midwestern harm reduction queer Arab Jewish legend, and really talks about the histories of liberatory harm reduction and drug users, sex workers, criminalized and street involved youth saving our own lives. Also a really challenging and beautiful and nourishing read. And my cat is really having the zoomies because she had wet food on break. Want to talk about the pandemic?
Yeah, let's do it. So there's a couple things we could talk about. We have a shorter amount of time. I think one thing I really want to say is that the pandemic is a mass disabling event. We are having incredible amounts of disabled folks. At this point, I think it's like a 50-50 chance that you have long COVID after even a mild case. It doesn't matter how severe the case. And the effects of long COVID are still being understood, but essentially it is effects that you are feeling at least 3 months after infection. Every time you get reinfected, a higher chance. So we are having incredibly high numbers of disabled folks. One of the studies that I read recently said that children who had COVID are more likely to have diabetes now. So we are seeing all kinds of new and increased disability, which means that we and other folks in these kind of helper roles, right, that we were talking about, need to be prepared and need to think about what does it mean that your clients are more of your clients are likely to be disabled, but also your colleagues are also more likely to be disabled, right? It is not just an other person thing. So really starting to think about how do we need to change the way we are working and doing the things that we want to do to prepare for these disabled futures. So for me as an educator, I've been really changing the way that I approach things in the classroom. I have thrown out my attendance policy. I've changed a lot of my assignments. I've reduced the amount of reading. I've made it easier for folks to come in and out of the classroom as needed. I also have digital virtual note taking. So we have volunteers every class take notes in a Google Doc that everybody has access to. That's often a disability accommodation that the office will then provide, but I do it for everybody. Everyone can have access to these notes. There's no reason that only folks with some disabilities get access to notes and others do not. So that's some ways that I'm changing my work practice, right? But we really want you all to be thinking about this for your own practice as we really come into what this means, not just in terms of people directly impacted by COVID, but we're also thinking about people who had to delay healthcare. Right? Did not have access to healthcare, didn't feel safe enough to go to a doctor for a while, or just had surgeries put off because hospitals were full, right? So they might not ever have had COVID, but have had increased disability as a result. And then also pandemic grief. So many of us have lost so many people, are deeply traumatized by those losses. I think a lot about my friends who are nurses and doctors dealing with so much death. And we've had no time to process, no time to collectively grieve. We just keep pushing on. And so disability, when we're talking about the pandemic as a mass disabling event, we're talking about disability in all these ways that are sometimes directly about COVID infection, and also about all the ways that COVID has now changed our society and disabled so many of us as a result.
Absolutely. Some things I would add, again, write this down. Please check out the Long COVID Survival Guide. It just came out. there's a lot of really important things in there by the two folks who wrote it, who are long COVID survivors, where I'm just remembering one part I put on Instagram where they were like, this is not a book with a magic cure. This is a book that will share information about, often citizen science and peer-based research, which is the best we've got. And they really harken back. They're like, this is like AIDS. This is like AIDS, which still continues, but AIDS in the 80s and 90s, where people with AIDS were doing massive amounts of research and info sharing when the government was like, you guys can go ahead and die because we don't care. And they were like, there's histories. That's a radical disabled movement of information sharing. People with chronic fatigue and ME, like me, have also been sharing information about what helps and things to try for years that your doctor probably will not tell you. And as people, I know that a lot of you have COVID. A lot of you are going to be working with people with COVID. This is important information. Just as important as like the treatments and the hacks is also being like calling in what Stacey Milburn called crip doulaing, where she was like, it's a term she invented. And she's like, yeah, that's the thing that happens in disabled community where, a more seasoned disabled person is like, oh, you're learning to use a wheelchair for the first time. I'll tell you how to do it. Oh, you don't have any energy or you need someone to help you put your underwear on. I'm going to talk to you about how that doesn't have to suck. And actually your life's still going to be good. That's really important because what I see is masses of newly disabled by COVID folks who often are like, this is a fate worse than death. And the government's going to be like, awesome, we want you to feel that way. There are projects out there and we need to keep building on them where more seasoned disabled folks are sharing our wisdom and support and peer support with folks who are newer to this. Super important. And I want to add to just, riffing off of and building on what, Sami, you mentioned pandemic grief. I just want to be really real and name something that you all probably already know, which is that we're still in a care crisis. There's a massive amount of need out there. In the days going up, Sami knows this, in the days coming up to this talk, I realized I lost 4 people in my community to death in the last month, and some by suicide and some by honestly long COVID stuff. Like I want to name Mira Bellwether, who is an amazing white trans femme organizer who got COVID and had cancer and had a stroke and died. And her partner has been really public about Mira, like many people, faced a lot of barriers to getting long COVID care. We're not sure if she would have had a stroke without the COVID, right? She was in her 30s. So I'm just sitting here being like, a lot of people are dying from broken hearts and grief. And how do I hold that as someone who also has a broken heart and grief, right? And my friend Jax McNamara, who co-founded Icarus Project, which became Fireweed, voice messaged me this morning and saying like, there are no easy solutions, but we are in it together and we are witnessing and holding each other. And my friend Audrey Huntley, who works with No More Silence, who's featured in Beyond Survival. She's an Indigenous and white Two-Spirit activist working with missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit folks in Toronto. She, she messaged me and she's like, I'm reading The Future is Disabled and I'm really feeling every year in Toronto for over 20 years on February 14th, there's a ceremony held by Indigenous folks and organizers, Strawberry Ceremony, outside of Toronto Police Headquarters, where it's a mass gathering to remember missing and murdered folks. And she's like, there's real overlap because she's like, a lot of us are disabled and a lot of us aren't. But she's like, it's a similar thing of like, there is loss all the time and there's not a quick fix, but we go through it together by being together safely, by witnessing each other, by not saying, oh, those feelings are inconvenient, make them go away, by making room for that loss to be in the room. And through ceremony, through food, through love, through bad jokes, through resistance. And I want to encourage you to bring that into your practices and your work.
We are right at the end. So I think rather than just having you journal, we'll throw out kind of our last question for you to think about throughout the rest of the conference as you continue to engage and prepare for your closing keynote at the end. So things we wanted you to think about include, how can you incorporate the principles of disability justice into your work? How does social work uphold systems of oppression? And how can you resist that? What are the ways within the limits that you have to be creative, right? We talked about disability creativity. How can you be creative in the ways that you push back within the power that you have? I think often we underestimate our personal power by saying, well, the rules are the people say, the authority above me, but really thinking about what can you do right now to impact the people right in front of you, right around you right now.
And I just want to add to that, you can always lie and you can always have a conspiracy at your job. We had a conspiracy at my hotline job that we would never mandate a report and we would figure out other ways and that we would lie to our funders about it. And that is a buried history in a lot of feminist anti-violence organizing. We can bring that back and we can figure out different ways around the system because an unjust law deserves breaking.
Absolutely.
Sami, thank you for being a fucking genius.
Oh my God, I love you.
I love you too. I love being the Sami and Leah show. Thank you all witnessing us, for having us, and for being wonderful and geniuses, and for the honor of being invited to open your conference.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah,
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leah and Sami, for this conversation. It was very much appreciated, and I'm even leaving with a lot of things to ask myself about the profession and how to incorporate more just disability justice themes into my overall practice. So with that, I do want to remind our conference attendees to check the Eventbrite page for links to our upcoming 6 breakout sessions that are going to start at 2 p.m. So, and I also want to remind you that you're hear from us about your CEUs if you registered to receive them and filled out that Google form that is connected to this plenary session. So yeah, we'll see you at the breakout sessions, and we'll also see you next week on February 3rd for the second portion of our conference. But once again, thank you much, Sami and Leah, for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye y'all.